The Bible is one of the most influential books in all of human history. It shaped nations and continents, been used to justify all kinds of acts and agendas, and transformed countless lives all over the world. The Bible is a collection of 66 different books written in 3 different languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. There's 2 parts to the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament has 39 books and the New Testament has 27. And the Bible was written over a period of 1600 years and has at least 41 different authors, including doctors, prophets, kings, fishermen, tax collectors, and scholars, who wrote in many different styles, including poetry, history, prophecy, and letters. It was written by people, but Christians believe, and the Bible itself claims to be, 100% inspired by God. How is this the case? It's rather like any building. The building is the vision of an architect, though the architect themselves may never lift a single stone. But every builder, every electrician, mason, carpenter, joiner, and labourer is inspired by the architect's vision to create the building. Each plays their part to contribute to the overall construction of the one building. The 39 books of the Old Testament have at their heart the story of a family which grows to become a nation. And this family is chosen by God to be the vehicle through which his divine plan is brought about. The Bible begins by telling the story of how God created the world and put humans into that world, where they were designed to live with God and to enjoy relationship with him forever. But the humans rebelled against God and chose to try to live without him and were cut off from him. The problem was that this choice introduced all kinds of brokenness and corruption into the world and into humanity itself, the end result of which is death. And Christians call this the fall. And the Old Testament tells the story of how God invited one family, which became a whole nation, to live in a new way that would open up a road to the whole of humanity coming back into the relationship with God. Relationship that humans were designed to enjoy. The only problem is that that family and that nation make bad choices along the way, and ultimately this leads to them being cut off from the land which God had promised them. And this is a symbol of their choice to again reject God. But the Old Testament doesn't end there. The story continues with a promise. Through his prophets, God sends a message that he is going to send a leader, a new king, to this family to transform them, to change them from the inside out so that they would be able to make the right choices and live with God. And the coming of that king will herald the beginning of the end for brokenness, corruption, and death that the first rebellion brought in with it. And then the Old Testament ends with the promise from God just hanging there. And for 400 years, nothing happens. But then the New Testament begins with the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they pick up this same story with the arrival of a man named John the Baptist. John the Baptist begins to remind people of this 400-year-old promise, the promise that God has made, a promise of a new leader, one who is going to come and restore this family to lead them into relationship with God. And then we're introduced to a man named Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus claims to be the fulfillment of all of these promises. He begins to teach this family, this nation, all about God, to show them what real good and evil looks like. He says things like, it's those who forgive and choose to love their neighbours and even their enemies, those who serve others and look after the poor and the sick, who wield true power in this world. The Bible goes on to record the claims that Jesus claimed not only to be a man, but that he was God become a man, come again to live with people, and that he had come to deal with the brokenness and the corruption in the world and in the people that was introduced when the humans decided to turn away from God. And Jesus does that by dying on a cross, which doesn't seem to make any sense. Jesus is supposed to be the king, and yet here he is being executed by the Romans. But the Bible records that 3 days after he was killed, Jesus was raised from the dead. See, Jesus didn't just come to teach people how to live. He came to show that through him, the enemies of humanity that had stalked mankind from within and without since that very first bad choice, the brokenness, the corruption, and even the ultimate enemy of death, have now been defeated and that one day they will be completely destroyed. So does this have any relevance to us today, or is it just a nice story? Well, every year 100 million Bibles are sold or given away, and the YouVersion Bible app has been downloaded over 200 million times. Every year the Bible is the top-selling book without fail. And it's the best-selling book because not only does the Bible tell this wonderful story, but the story that it tells and the truth that it contains and communicates has the power to transform people. When Jesus rose again from the dead and showed that every enemy had been defeated through him, he presented a new choice. Accept his invitation to live in a new way and in relationship with God, as we were always designed to, or carry on living in the old way, in the old world that's still subject to all of the brokenness, corruption, and death. It's a choice between the old and the new, between death and life. And Jesus promises for those that choose life, they can now live with the same power of God that raised Jesus from the grave inside of them. This power, the Holy Spirit, will give them the ability to make the right choices and to know that they are loved and forgiven by God. And as they are loved and forgiven, in turn, they can love and forgive others in the world. The rest of the New Testament charts how the early movement of Jesus' followers, who eventually became known as Christians, spread out from Israel across the world. As they go, they are hated and mistreated by those outside of the movement because of this radical message they carry. And they are subject to those inside of the movement who are confused or who have compromised on what they believe. So the movement's leaders, called apostles, write letters to the different groups of Christians around the world to encourage them, to address this confusion and to keep them on the path of following Jesus' way of life. The Bible ends by pointing forward to the day when Jesus returns to ultimately deal with the enemies of humanity, to do away with pain, suffering, injustice, and death, and where all evil will be banished and God and humanity can live together again, restored back to that perfect relationship we were always designed to experience. Today, the Bible still offers the same choice to its readers: to choose to ignore what Jesus said and carry on living as we've always lived, or to accept Jesus' invitation to enter into a new life, to be filled with the Holy Spirit and empowered to live a life that loves and serves others, forgiving as God forgives us, and to ultimately live forever in relationship with God who designed us that way. At the heart of it, the Bible tells the story of how God has made a way through Jesus to restore you and I back to a relationship with him. It extends an invitation. It presents a choice. Which will you choose?
If you've enjoyed this video, we'd really love you to head over to our website and connect with us. At Life Church, we've created The Journey, which is a great place to begin your journey with God or to find out more. We want to help you, resource you, encourage you, and equip you so that you can discover who God created you to be. As well as that, you can find out more about everything we do on our Facebook and YouTube pages. We look forward to hearing from you.